Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening, viewers. My name is Annie McCann. I'm one of the co-founders of this amazing network called The Right Pen Collective. It was created about 6 to 12 months ago, so it's quite new, and it was created in an effort to connect, support, and empower Australian Muslim writers. The question, being, where are all the Muslim writers here in Australia? As you can see with my bookshelf, the collection of Muslim writers around the world has increased, but we couldn't actually find any based in Australia. So the idea of this network is to create a connection between Muslim writers here in Australia in the hope that we'll see more of their work published and on the shelves as commonly as we see Vegemite on supermarket shelves. Yes, I love that line. So before I continue, I would just like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land in which I'm coming from today. Specifically, I'm live streaming to you from the land of the Darug people of the Eora Nation. I would also like to extend my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledging that the land that we are on is stolen land, as sovereignty was not conceded. So this evening, I have an absolute pleasure to present to you our Muslim writers in the MG space panel. Today, I have amazing authors Huda Hayek and Melati Lum, both accomplished writers in the MG space, which means middle grade. We're going to have a bit of a conversation about their experiences and the writing journey to publication. If you have any questions, we do encourage you to ask them. Please send them through directly to me. My name today is The Right Pen Collective. You'll find me at the top of the chat. Just also a friendly reminder that this is a safe place to everybody here in the network and at the panel. So please ensure that your questions and comments are respectful. Any form of abuse or disrespect will not be tolerated, and we will remove you from the session. So once again, Huda and Melati, assalamu alaikum, welcome. Thank you for being here. It's exciting to talk to you both and share the virtual stage with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I've said who you are very briefly, but I'd like to hand it over to you to introduce yourselves and talk to us a little bit about what you've done. Huda, if I may, I might start with you very quickly. So please just tell us who you are. This is Huda's book, everyone, for those who may not know. I'll put it up there for a few seconds. Huda and Me. I loved this book so much. It was so cute. I loved it. So over to you, Huda. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I go by the name on the book of H. Hayek, and we just want to confuse readers to think it was an autobiography or anything like that. So yeah, it's the book was a long time in the making. I started off in journalism, and then I went into primary school teaching. And then when about 7 years ago, I thought there was a way to combine my love of writing and my love of working with kids in a more fun and kind of, an exciting way, something that was valuable and I felt like could make a mark on them and using those skills that I'd developed in both of my careers. So yeah, that's how Huda and Me came to fruition.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And last but definitely not least, Melati Lum. I'm just going to put the I'm going to say that again. I want to put a photo of her book on the share screen for a few seconds. This is the first book in a Melati series called the Aisha Dean series, but I'll get Melati to talk to you a little bit more about that. And I love this book too. And as you can see, the person in the front, I have to cosplay her one day, and you'll find out why shortly. Over to you, Melati.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for everyone for being here today. Just before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that I am speaking to you today from the land of the Kaurna people, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Yeah, so I am the author of Aisha Dean. This is so you saw the first one in the series. The second one is The Seville Secret. And the third one is The Lisbon Lawbreaker, which was published earlier this year. And Aisha is pretty much an Australian Muslim teenage detective. Well, she's not, she wants to be a detective, but she loves solving mysteries and she loves traveling and doing all getting into crazy situations and trying to get out of it. But yeah, that's essentially her. She loves when she goes traveling, she loves looking at the culture and eating all the food and examining some of the history as well. And in particular, in the places that she goes, there's some Islamic history that I try to kind of bring to light as well, which is part of the Aisha Dean series.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I would just like to say personally, terima kasih banyak to Melati Lum for writing this book, because Aisha Dean is actually Indonesian Australian and I'm Indonesian Australian. This was the first time I've ever read a book with a character who was central to the story, and she was Indonesian Australian. So that's why I mentioned I need to cosplay her one day, as you can see on the front cover. And I have to say, like, that was the first time I've ever read a book with that particular character, and I read that in my adulthood. So again, echoing what I was saying before, where have all these books been all this time? So just on that though, Huda and Melati's books are available at Better Read Than Dead bookstore Newtown. They're our proud festival partners. We want to thank them so much for supporting us throughout this festival. It's been amazing. Very exciting to share that a lot of orders have come through, particularly for Huda and Melati's books, and they thank you all very much. So there is a link, I believe Arkson's put that in the chat for you, so you can make an order. And if they don't have it, they will order it in, and free shipping. Making note of that. It's very exciting. I love it. So Huda and Melati, once again, welcome. Thank you for telling us who you are and what you've worked on. Let's have a chat about MG, middle grade, because this is a topic that seems to be a topic of debate with a lot of writers. I'd like to know what your take on what a middle grade writer is and what age group that it targets. Either of you can take the plate on this one.
Oh, okay. I think that middle grade is, I think in kind of like the formal version of it is, the age range between 8 and 12. And it's kind of like the bridge between early readers and young adults. So we're kind of like in that network, but it's not really a genre as such, because it can be sci-fi, it can be mystery, it can be realistic fiction, it can be any of those things. In terms of Huda and Me, I think Huda and Me kind of is more of a 9 to 13 year old bracket. So it's flexible. I think that the middle grade, the title of it, it's not this hard and fast rule. It's kind of letting people know where the bridge is, what kind of readers might be looking at this. And it's a book usually chooses its readers. So you can have someone reading Huda and Me or Aisha Dean who are older than that or younger than that. And it really is dependent on the reader.
Definitely. Melati?
Yeah, I agree with Huda. It's a little bit tricky in that readers from the ages of 8 to 12 can be so varied. You can just imagine an 8-year-old child, and the development that actually happens from the time they're 8-year-old to the time that they're 12 and they're pre-teens. It can be a huge development occurring in those ages. So it's hard to kind of necessarily say where you are on the spectrum there. With my books, the first one, Istanbul Intrigue, is probably directed more towards the lower end of the age range, and the second one kind of is a little bit more complex, and then the last one is again there's a step up in complexity as well, and the word count. So all of them are still middle grade, but probably the first one was on the lower end of the scale, and the last one was towards the end.
Mm-hmm. Which makes perfect sense, Melati, because your character isn't the same age all the time, like they grow. So I guess that makes sense that as a trilogy, the characters grow in age and maybe maturity. So that makes perfect sense that there might be a little bit more complex, story or content in the third one compared to the first one. Would you agree with that as well?
Yeah. I did have to do a bit of a sneaky age change, because when I started it, I wasn't thinking necessarily along those lines, and then it was later on when I realized, okay, this is happening, that I revised the first one and did and changed it a little bit in that regard.
Thank you. Yeah, that's actually quite informative, very, very well in an answer there, because I'm a writer myself. I'm an emerging writer, and I'm attempting to write for a middle grade space, capturing the West Javanese culture, which is where I'm from, combining that into an urban fantasy time travel story. And I had a conversation with someone who was convinced that my story was more lower YA because of content and the age. But it just seems to be one of those things that it could be what they call a scalable spectrum, like it can go up, it could go down, etc. So would you say that it's not just the age of the character, it's also the content and where the character is going? to both, yeah, both of you.
Yeah, we both agree.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's just, yeah, the content is essential. It's not about just the words on the page, and if a child can decipher them and read them, there's so much more to it. And if a child doesn't understand the content, really, it's a bit it can be pointless, or it can go over their heads, and could be inappropriate. So there has to be this kind of like baseline where you say, oh, this fits here and this fits there, so that parents, librarians, teachers can find a book that suits the kid.
Definitely, yeah. Melati?
I do hear what you're saying as well, in that it can be tricky, because I like with my third one, my editor was also questioning whether or not it's going a little bit too far, like it could be possibly on the lower end of YA as well. Which it could be, again, because all children are different, and all, there's different rates of development. I know when I was a child, we somehow, I think when I think back to the books that I was reading at 12, we didn't have a lot of YA in those olden days. And
it wasn't that long ago for you, Melati.
But the thing is, we didn't have the YA so much, so we just kind of went straight into adult books,
Sure.
and we just, that seemed to be okay at that time. But then again, there are there could be things that are inappropriate for a child of that age as well. So it's a bit of a balancing act, really.
Definitely.
And it comes down, you can, sorry, Annie, you can just, it might be in a section of middle grade or for early readers or young adult or whatever it is, but all it takes is to pick up the book and have a look at the blurb, read the first page, and you can kind of get an insight into what kind of book is appropriate for the child as well. And a child will be able to tell for themselves usually.
Yeah, it's not like videos, like they don't come with a rating at the front of a book, like, general exhibition or PG. They don't really have that. So it can be quite tricky in balancing that, definitely. And I think one thing to point out as well, and I've learnt this with writers' festivals too, is that children read older than them. So like a 9-year-old usually would pick up a book that does feature a 12-year-old. It's not too old for them. And I think, the content, whilst it's tricky, it's one of those situations where, one of the authors had asked a 12-year-old class, so what's that, year 6, year 7, also, who here's read spy books? And a few people. Romance? No one put their hand up. Okay, horror. Oh, everybody put their hand up. And it's scary, but it's adventurous. And I think you can balance that to have it age appropriate and have that element of scare, but it's still, appropriate for a child. So definitely tricky. Talk us through your writing process for both of you when you wrote your book. Was it a situation where you had to consult with, someone of that age to understand their lingo? Did you have to read middle grade novels to get an understanding of how they talk and the content or the language? Walk us through your process.
Melati, you go first.
I think that, being a parent kind of helps as well. So, you kind of are reminded of what a child that age, what the kind of things that they're looking at and language that they use. But the main thing when I was writing, I was just remembering myself as a reader around that age. And I wrote the story that I would have wanted to read when I was that age. But I did have to kind of look back on the language a little bit, and there are some newfangled terms that the kids these days are using.
Changes every 5 minutes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, go on. Yeah. Oh, Huda?
I in terms of the language, I found it, because the character Huda is based on myself at that age, I found it really easy to kind of tap back into how we spoke as kids in my family. And I should have mentioned what the book is about. So it's based on myself and my 6 siblings. And although the story is fiction, it has elements of real in the characters, because they're based on myself and my siblings and my parents. So I found it so easy just to go in and tap into how we spoke. And I think to some degree, we still speak like that to each other. Like, I don't know if when you're around your siblings, if you guys just revert back to your 10-year-old self, I think we do that in my family, which is something, it's just fun. So I found it really easy to tap into that. And because I am a primary school teacher, I'm around kids all the time. And I see how they speak and I see how they connect with each other. Annie, what was your original question? I don't want to go on a rant.
No, it was more your progress. So when you were writing for middle grade, So in your way, tapping into that lingo of that age group, you tapped into your 9-year-old self. A lot of that stuck with you, even to now with your 6 siblings. So
yeah, that's right. And I find dialogue the easiest. I enjoy writing scenes with dialogue because I just find that when 2 characters, when you know them so well, you know how they speak, or if it's 3 or 4 characters on the page, when you know how they speak, it just kind of like you can just imagine the things that they'd be saying.
That's so cute. I mean, I read both of your books. Yeah, Melati, please.
Yes. Yeah. So sorry, I was going to say, and also reading middle grade, a lot of other middle grade helps as well, just to get your head back into that space.
Yes, I had to do the same because I talk to adults all the time in my work, and I don't have the siblings I grew up with like Huda or Melati would have. And like one of the littlest things that I learned was like a 12-year-old probably would never say the word perhaps. Like that's like I wrote that in my manuscript and I'm like, oh yeah, 12-year-olds don't say that, they say something else. It's really funny. And reading middle grade did help me as well, but it was more language style and the dialogue and things like that. So that is very helpful. But tapping into more serious stuff in terms of, writing a character that is Muslim for a Western market, was that at all challenging for you, or was it something that was quite receptive because it's relatively new?
You go, Melati. I don't want to. I
feel like I need to flip coins.
You go first.
Sorry, it's hard.
I'll take the next one.
When I first started, the first one was released in 2016, and at that time, when I was writing it, and before that, there wasn't that much out there. The kind of diversity movement in publishing hadn't really started at that stage. So when I first wrote it, I was thinking of a Muslim audience, mainly because I just thought as a Muslim, I wanted to see, I would have wanted to see a Muslim character when I was growing up. And I just wanted that for our children and for next generation as well. But it was only after I published it that I kind of realized that there was probably a wider appeal that I didn't really, wasn't sure existed before then. So yeah, I mean, the thing is, the character is an Australian Muslim. So growing up as an Australian Muslim, I think having grown up myself as an Australian Muslim, I wasn't really thinking so much of the audience, just telling the stories, the character's story.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%, like just telling the character's story. So when you think of the character and this is what they are and this is what makes them, the story kind of goes from that. And yeah, I agree. In terms of Muslim representation, I guess I didn't go out. That wasn't really my plan. I was wanting to be creative and I wanted to write a story about these characters, and especially based on my family. And it's an adventure more than anything. The story is just a funny adventure where these kids just want to do this plan and just the funny things that come along with it. So that was my motive, I suppose, just to have a really good story. But within that is, they're layers. They're Muslim, they're Lebanese. Their parents are from overseas. Their parents are from Lebanon. They migrated to Melbourne, and so they're these Aussie Muslim Lebanese kids. I think it's so important that. So we need to write books so that Muslim kids can see themselves, because they're at that, especially middle grade, they're at that age where they're trying to find things they can relate, people and characters they can relate to. So having them be able to pick up a book and say, oh, this kid looks like me, might talk like me, their family is similar to mine. That's really important. So they feel connected to outside. But the other thing is that if there are you know, Aussie kids who don't have much diversity around them and live in their own in their communities, and there aren't many brown people or Muslims or whatever you are, they're able to access these books too, so that when they encounter a Muslim person or an Aboriginal person or someone from Indonesia, wherever they are, and when they do that in real life, they'll be able to say, oh, that's not so unfamiliar. That's not so different. Oh yeah, I read about them. They're fine. They're normal. So difference isn't so scary if we have these books out there.
Definitely. Because we celebrate the diversity, yes.
Because we are in a multicultural society, and
exactly,
you know, 50% of the population has a grandma or grandparent from overseas. It's not. It's a lot of people know at least of a Muslim person in their school or you know, in their class. So it's not. It's just they know of the people. They might not know the details of, you know, what the experiences are like growing up and all of that. So yeah, definitely it helps to kind of give them that education and that insight into a different kind of way of thinking or with a different culture. But then again, it's not so out there that they never would have come across a Muslim before.
Yeah, and yeah, again, drawing a parallel to the real life, again, growing up a Muslim in Australia, I was surrounded by Muslim people. I grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney, heavily multicultural, and even the schools I went to embraced multiculturalism, but I never found a book that represented myself. So as a Muslim, I was thinking, okay, so where do I fit in the literary space? It wasn't until my adulthood I started seeing more, you know, Muslim representation. And then I guess to extend it to a non-Muslim audience, again, drawing parallel to the people around you, that we're not too different. We're just people, you know, we might live a little bit differently, but it's not that outrageous that we're Muslim. We've had a question come in from the audience. I was just scrolling to see, because I didn't want to miss anybody. Beck Harcourt, thank you so much for your question. Beck would like to know can we ask if writers test drafts with Muslim kids too to get honest feedback before they hand it in? I would say, I guess, before they goes to an editor. Have you done that?
I did it with because I was in the classroom. I wasn't teaching you know, that grade 5 and up year levels. I was in the lower years, so I did test it on a colleague's classroom, and I didn't tell them. I kind of switched things around, didn't tell them who wrote the book or anything like that, because I didn't want them to be nice to Miss Huda. And so and their reception to it was just really lovely, and they wanted to me to read the second chapter and onwards. So I guess that was kind of my really informal test.
Yeah. Melati?
I did with the first one. I'm probably a little bit lax with the next ones, but there's definitely one. It's definitely something that I'm going to look into further for the ones coming up. And probably more on a bit more of a wider scale. It's just it's it definitely, that from the first one that I did, I got some really good feedback that and that I used, that really it helps. You know, the more eyes that you can get on it before it goes to the editor, the better.
Yes, I can attest to that. I mean, I'm still, you know, in that working in progress mode, but I'm, you know, trying to access my own, you know, target audience, you know, a Muslim audience, you know, someone who speaks Bahasa and English and from similar background to myself. And I've even handed the manuscript to, you know, a white man that I work with, you know, completely, you know, outside of the spectrum. So I wanted to see, you know, who understands this better, who can connect with it better, etc. So it's actually really helpful to do that as well. Choosing your trusted friends, of course, you know, you don't want your work to land into the wrong hands. We did have a question. I think Uzka sent me a chat. Let me just double check that for you. Just give me a moment. Yes, she mentioned something. Oh, okay. It was with regards to Huda's editing process. There was a part of the book that was mentioned. There is a scene of wudu. So for those who don't know what wudu is, it's the ablution that we take before we do our 5 daily prayers. And there was an incident or a conversation where they wanted you to take that wudu part out, or they wanted you to amend it. Can you talk us through that if that ever happened at all?
We shortened it only because it was like, you know, the steps can be like to explain. First, you have to wash your hands 3 times, and you have to rinse your mouth 3 times, then your nose 3. So we did cut it a little. I'm not sure if it's the same. Perhaps she's talking about the scene where the prayer happened, where the grandpa I think that might be the one she's talking about. So we did shorten the would do it scene just to make it a little bit more concise for readers and, you know. Grandpa. Yes. Scene. So there was, I had written this really long scene. It was just too long and it needed to be shortened. So my editor said, hey, what about if the grandpa gets out of bed and does his prayer? Why do we have to have him go to the bathroom first? And I was like, oh, like that would be if he didn't go to the bathroom and do his wudu, then every Muslim kid in the whole world be like, that granddad.
He didn't take his wudu.
Yeah, he just got out of bed. And everyone knows that when you sleep, well, any Muslim would know when you sleep, you break your wudu. So it's just, and you can't pray without the wash. So so the grandpa got out of bed and he was just about to pray, and that's a no-no. So like that's why you have to have this really good relationship with your people, your editor and your publisher, so that you have that they made it so comfortable that I was able to say, no way, absolutely not, can't do that. And she was like, of course, like, okay, that makes sense. So yeah, those things, those little nuances have to only like a specific eye would be able to pick up on.
Yeah, sure. But it's important. It's a little thing because, again, you're not writing for a non-Muslim audience either. You're writing for both audiences and you need to get that right. You don't want someone saying, hang on a minute, he didn't do that. That's not right. And then it comes across as inauthentic as well. So definitely. Aksan has a question. I'll get her in a second. Melati, I just wanted to check in terms of your editing process because I don't think you didn't go down the traditional editing path, did you? So yeah, can you walk us through like anything that you were expected to change because it wasn't, I don't know, it was non-Muslim enough?
So the first book that I published, I went straight into self-publishing. I didn't at that time realize that there would have been a market or a kind of I guess a desire to see Muslim publishing in Australia. But by the time the second one came out, I thought, oh, okay, things have changed a little bit. So I might put that one out there, see what happens. I, at that time, wasn't really aware so much about the whole, it's a series. So you've got the problem of the first one already being published and then trying to go into the second one. But anyway, put it out there and got some feedback, which was good. I had some semi-interest from some publishers in Australia and some Muslim publishers overseas. And what I got from the Australian publishers, I got the sense that they were semi-interested, but they weren't too interested. What they wanted, the feeling that I got was that they wanted more of a coming of age, examining the identity type book. And Aisha Dean is just not that. She's just, she knows who she is. She's very confident in her faith and she just wants to get down and solve mysteries pretty much. She just wants to have, it was mainly about entertainment and trying to find a fun story that young people would like, that just happened to have a Muslim character as the hero. But what I got from the Muslim, some of the Muslim publishers was, and this is tricky because she's pretty feminist, Aisha Dean, and there's probably some bits in there that well, there's one scene in one of the books where she leads a man in prayer, and for anyone who read that, for the non-Muslims who read that, they probably wouldn't have even batted an eyelid. It wouldn't have even that they probably wouldn't have seen any kind of significance in that, whereas the Muslim publishers did. And even though that our Prophet Muhammad SAW at the time, in his time, there was a Muslim woman imam who he obviously he knew about, and she was leading the community in prayer at that time. a lot of the Muslim people have kind of forgotten that history, and it can be a little bit potentially what's the word, controversial a little bit in some areas, of our community. So there's little bits and pieces in there that that pose a challenge, and for which self-publishing can be really handy, in that you can do what you want in terms of, that was a part of the book that wasn't really part of the story. Like it was part of the story, but it wasn't central to the plot. But it was something that was important to me, that I wanted in there, and it might not have been. It could have been cut if I'd gone down any other path.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like through traditional publishing, there are some compromises you need to make. In some cases, you can stand your ground and say, no, a Muslim does this, I'm going to leave that in there. But I guess, in more of self-publishing, you've got that, creative control over 100% of your work. So I guess that's the difference there. Okay, before I lose track, Aksan, can you hear me? Our co-host / co-founder.
Yes, I can.
Had a question.
Yes, I can.
Welcome.
Thanks, Annie, and thank you, Melati and Huda. But as Huda mentioned before, bulk of middle age is really where the identity is starting to take shape. I see this from my 9-year-old now too, especially so. So was using Islamic lingo important for you in illustrating a holistic image of your character in this book, Huda or Melati? And did this worry you that it might not be taken so well with the Australian market? When I talk about Muslim lingo, our kids say haram, halal, subhanallah, mashallah, what? No, these kind of things, so common with our kids. Did you use them? I know you did in your books. And did this worry you?
I used them, and I had no worry about using them, because that's they're authentic voices. They weren't voices that I was envisioning. That's how kids speak. And I was kind of sensitive in some ways, where I kind of tried to have it slotted in so you could make the meaning of it in the next sentence or before. Like you might not know exactly what it means. I mean, it's not going to make anyone feel like, oh, I don't belong. This book isn't for me. It doesn't fit me. It was more just, I was trying to cushion it in something so everyone could kind of get the meaning of it. So I thought it was really super important. And if you're writing an own voices book, and a book about certain characters coming from a certain place, if they're only speaking English, that's a bit funny for me.
Melati, was that the same experience for yourself?
I didn't have any qualms at all in including those words. That's just part of the everyday vocabulary of a practicing Muslim. So it's it comes naturally to that character, so it needs to be in there. What I did, I think in the first one, I had hijab in italics, and I was actually my editor who said, hijab is part of the Australian, vocabulary now. It doesn't need to be in italics. And I was like, yeah, all right, good. I'll do that. Yes, took it out of italics. I think the others I still put in italics at the stage, like alhamdulillah. But I think I've slowly started to. I'm looking at that for future books, and whether or not we need italics in all those situations that we used to need them.
Glossary of terms. Sorry, go.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I was going to say I didn't have a glossary in any of my books, because I didn't think it needed it for, as Huda said, when within the way it's used in the story, I think it was quite self-evident what the meaning was. So they can Google.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, just the one thing I wanted to add. First, Aksan, thank you so much for your question. That was a really good question. But what I wanted to take away from this was, I think it's important as a Muslim writer to remain unapologetically Muslim in your book, because as soon as you start branching away from that, then you're actually making I guess, allowances for it not to be okay for the person to be Muslim. And one of the things I see as a Muslim reader is, you know, if you have to translate absolutely everything, then you're ignoring your own community. And one thing that I've learned through my writing process as well, and you know, thankfully I've received pretty good feedback on this, is, you know, I don't have a glossary, and I don't translate everything in, you know, when I use the Bahasa, when I use the Islamic terms as well, because, you know, in the next sentence or so, there's context to the conversation, and the reader, Muslim, non-Muslim, Indonesian, non-Indonesian, will get it. And if they really, really want to know, you've got Google, and that's what you've got, which is fantastic. So I think that's a very important message to send as well. And yeah, look, glossaries, I think, is a discretionary thing. Some people choose to have it, some people don't. There have been authors that feel that, you know, putting a glossary takes away, you know, the fact that, you know, we're trying to access the same community as us. But I think it's yeah, it's quite discretionary, which is very interesting. So thank you for that. Very quick question though, both of you, are you plotters or pantsers?
Plotters or
pantsers?
I'm a pantser. I'm a pantser.
Yeah, pantser meant something different back in my day. I will explain that shortly.
I have a very, really rough plot, but it never kind of it never kind of ends up like how I think it's going to end up.
Yeah. Some authors
I'd say
really plot it out. Sorry,
I'd say like a loose plotter. Like I've kind of got this idea. I need somewhere to go in my mind. But yeah, like Melati said, everything changes once you sit down and start writing.
Yes, yeah. Like you might have an initial plan, but sometimes the story just writes itself. You have this plan and all of a sudden something completely different happens. So that's quite interesting. Very, very cool. In terms of like timeline, I'm very curious to know, in terms of like writing a middle grade book, how many words roughly was your book, and how long did it take you to write your first draft, or at least before you got to an editor? Either of you.
It was, I think I submitted it at 45,000 words, and then it was cut back. And I do tend to overwrite, which I think is a good thing. So then it was cut back to just over 40, I believe. Yeah. And yeah, I can't remember the second part to that question.
How long it took you to write the first draft?
The first draft. Yeah. Oh, that's it was a few years, like a good. Yeah, it was probably, I think in total, maybe 3 years, but that was with a lot of stuff going on, like kids and pregnancy. Yeah. So yeah, maybe 3 to 3.5 years.
Wonderful. Yeah, Melati?
But the first one was around 30,000 words, and then it kind of went up. So the next one was around 48,000, and then the next one was 60,000. And I know that's on the high end of the scale for a middle grade book, but again, going with that kind of progression that I was going kind of with from book 1 to book 3, it kind of made, I don't know, I think it worked for what I was trying to achieve at that time. But yeah, it took, I think it takes maybe about a year for me to do a first draft, and then all the edits after that kind of take quite a bit longer.
Oh, it is a slog, isn't it? It's a marathon, not a sprint. So if you are planning to write, it's not a quick endeavor. You know, I started writing about 2-3 years ago now. I won a fellowship about 2 years ago, and I'm still working on my work in progress. So it is a marathon, and be patient with it. Oh, we had a question come through. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm scrolling through the chat, so excuse if you see my finger. I'm very sorry. I'm using a tablet. Okay, we had a question from Sophia Alamudi. Thank you very much for your question. Sophia would like to know, what's the hardest part of writing a book?
Melati, do you want to go first, or shall I?
You go first. To think about.
I think everyone is different. Mine is self-doubt. I think that's the hardest part. It's not necessarily the writing or the plot or any of that. I think it's just believing that this is good enough to get to the end of while you're writing, and that it's good enough for people to want to read, and it's entertaining enough, and it ticks all the boxes of what makes a decent book. So that's the hardest part. Getting to the end is so hard, because you'll go through all these emotions over that 40 or 45,000 words and through all those chapters. But if you just keep writing, and I guess that's a bit of advice to any emerging writers out there, you just have to keep writing and push all those. It's not good to push away emotions, but in this case, when they're negative and they're going to pull you down and going to stop you from achieving this awesome thing, then you keep going. And there are so many books along the way. The War of Art, Stephen King's novel, what was that, on writing. Those ones were really ones that propelled me. So when I was feeling doubtful, I would turn outwards and read what the professionals say on writing so that I could give myself that boost to keep going.
I think that's exactly what Huda said. I think that's probably the most challenging thing about writing, is just that kind of the motivation to keep going when you there's so many things that could kind of make you stop. It's most writers, I mean, some people are lucky enough to be able to do it and it be, you know, their income, and they're able to live off it. But for the majority of writers, you're juggling, you know, a job, you're juggling your family and life, or your health issues, whatever it might be, on top of that. So it's kind of trying to find that time to actually just put that time aside and get something down. And then for me personally, I kind of hate the first, hate, I guess is a strong word, but like from my last book, the first 6 chapters, the first draft of the first 6 chapters, I was just going, nah, this is not happening. This is not happening. And it was only once I pushed through that, and then got to a stage where I go, oh yeah, that's right, that wasn't happening. Delete all of that and start again, pretty much, where it kind of came to me. But I needed to write those crappy 6 chapters in order to delete them before I knew, oh, okay, this is where it's going. So it's kind of, there's a lot of that. It's a lot of like putting something down, even if it's crap, and just kind of pushing through the crap and kind of keep going.
I hear that. I remember reading my first submission to the Write It Fellowship that I put in. When I got it back, I read that. It was only 5,000 words, thank God. I thought, my God, this is garbage. I sent this? Oh my God. But the one thing is, it doesn't matter that it's garbage. You can edit it, and you can't edit a blank page. So even if there's self-doubt, just write. That's right. Yeah, continue writing. We had a comment come through from the audience. Cheryl Gweither, thank you so much for your comment. She said, some famous writer says she never puts her foreign words in italics because once a reader sees italics, their eyes jump over the word. Whereas if it's the same language as the text, the brain actually reads it. And she's actually tested this and it works. So that's actually a very good tip.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah,
very good. Yes. So look, as authors in the MG space, I'm actually quite keen to know from your experience. Obviously, we can see that there is a bit of movement and momentum gathering in terms of diversity and inclusion in our work and in books. Do you think that there's still a lot of work to be done, or is the gap starting to close?
I think the gap is starting to close, but not anywhere near at the rate that it should. It's happening very slowly. I tuned into Runda's panel on the weekend, and compared to when she started out, she submitted her manuscript when she was 16 years old, and there was nothing on the space at that time. Now there are names, and you know, like you said, Annie, there's a collection behind you of authors, and we've been traditionally published and self-published. So there's an array of books with Muslim characters out there. But yes, considering how many Muslim kids are out there, is it enough?
That's right. Yeah.
And I think this, I can't remember if we talked about this in another panel, but you know, when you're looking at books that are released around Christmas time, for example, there are, you know, how many books about Christmas that we see released, but a lot of the time with Muslim books, there's kind of like this kind of feeling or something that we can have one and then that's it. Like it's, you know, you need one
Muslim book. Yeah,
the one Ramadan book or the one Eid book, and then, you know,
That's
we can't have more than that. Yeah, we can't have more than that. But really it's, you know, there's so much space, there's so much room for more and for more stories.
I believe that. Yeah. And
I was going to say, Melati, I'm not sure if you get this, but I've received emails from kids saying, when's the next one? Please, when's the next one? What happens? I really relate to Huda. I really relate to Akil or one of the other characters. So they can read it and it will take them a day or 2 or a week to get through. And then what? Then they're just waiting for the next author or the next publisher to release a book with a character that they can resonate with.
Yeah, understood. There's so much space for all of these voices to come out, which I'm really excited about, that hopefully the gap is starting to close. And yes, we're not a box just to be ticked. That's something that I want to make very clear. Like what Melati was saying, we have so many, multiple, we have Christmas catalogs sent to us all the time, or, Mother's Day catalogs, Father's Day catalogs, and all that.
And
So
just the amount,
I'm waiting for
just
an
the,
ink one.
that's right. I mean, I'm just the amount of, on the bookshelves that you see, the fart books that are out there. I mean, you kind of like, there's such a wide array of, fart books that you can get, that, and obviously the kids are still interested in it, but it's not just because you have one, you can't have more. You can have more. And I think that's something that we need to kind of embrace.
100%. Yeah, like how many books do you need on farting? Like, honestly, like you said, a wide array of fart books out there, because there's multiple ways of doing it. We had a question come through directly from Musa Alamoudi. Thank you so much for your question, Musa. Musa would like to know, how would you create a base for your book to grow on?
Melati, I think you're much better at this than me.
Sorry, what do you mean by base? Do you mean like the basic story or plot, or?
That's all I got in the question. I'm assuming, and please, Musa, if you can hear me, correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, he's saying yes. So I would say the foundation of your book.
Okay, I talk it like the audience readership. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't. Sorry, so you're talking about the base of the readership.
Sorry. Did you want me to repeat the question? I'll just repeat the question because that's all I got. Sorry, Musa. How would you create a base for your book to grow on? So I'm assuming what Musa meant was your foundation of the story. So personally, for me, I have a book with just points of the ideas of what I want, and then you go into the nitty gritty. Is that how you work as well?
Yeah, I think so as well. It's you might have. I mean, I find it. I don't have a. I do try to have a really, really loose plot, but I think that's, for me, it depends if you're a plotter or a pantster, but like for a pantster, you have a really, really loose plot, and as you start writing, it kind of comes to you a bit more. The base, I think, you might just start with, it might just be one idea. So for me, for example, travel is a big thing that I love and that I like to base my books around. So I will pick a location. That will be my first thing. And from there, usually for me, it's a location that I've been to before. So I will remember, I will look at photos, my old photos, other photos on the internet, and try to kind of get myself into that location, and then I guess go from there. And if it's not a location, it can be, it can be anything. But for me, a location is a big thing.
Sure. Huda?
I think just knowing your character well enough. So I have like the loose plot, but it's kind of based on what the character would do when I put them in that situation. So I see how the character is going to react and what is their purpose. And that kind of drives my thought in terms of the why. Why does she want that? Why does he want that? What does that character want that's stopping them? So it's kind of traditional, I think. It's kind of like what we teach kids in primary school, like what's the conflict? What's the beginning? What's the middle? What's the end? And what's the conflict and what's the resolution? So I kind of follow that in my mind, and I keep reminding myself of the why the whole time. But my characters, I feel like they really do drive the story, because I'll figure things out through them as they figure them out. And is that what she's going to do now? So let's go with that. So that's kind of how I work. I don't know if that's very helpful, but yeah, that's how it's done with me.
Well, that's some great advice from both of you. Thank you. And I think one thing I'd like to just throw my 2 cents in as well is never underestimate your own idea, because it might not work in chapter 1, but it can work maybe in chapter 12. You never know. And always just keep writing, because no idea is stupid. It's just get the idea on the paper and work with it from there. So at least you've got a foundation and you can build on it. So I think that's really good. I like that idea. You have that in your head. Oh, and I forgot to mention, yes. So plotter is somebody who really irons out their story from the very beginning and they work it through closely. A pantser just basically hits the page and they just let the fingers type the words. So I know it meant something completely different back in my old days. So Yes, so that's not what it means now. Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes left of our session. Unfortunately, I could talk to you all day. Oh, sorry, we had one last question sneak in before I go to my questions. This one came from Uzka. Uzka, thank you so much for your question. It's just coming up. Do you like their characters? Oh no, sorry, I misread that. Are you like the characters you've written? Sorry.
I want to know how much of Huda is in Huda, and I want to know how much of Melati is in Aisha, please.
Yes.
I'd say a lot of me is in her. She's a braver version of how I was at the character's age, and she's stronger, she's fiercer, she's more confident. But when my siblings, I think it was my brother Akil who picked up the book, there was a line that Huda had said in the book, and he was like, I'm pretty sure you did that. I'm pretty sure you did that thing in real life. And none of it, like the whole setting and the plot and all of that, that's completely fictional. But I believe there's a lot of just the lingo and things that we did as kids, and because it is our names in the book, there's got to be some elements of real. But I'm not that naughty.
So she says. Melati, how much of Aisha are you?
This is something I get asked all the time. I think it's, I think we had it in one of the other sessions as well. It's so hard not to say that it's an autobiography. I mean, not to, to convince other people it's not an autobiography. But yeah, there are some aspects of her that I have got from my own experiences of growing up, being the only hijabi in a very white Christian school, and the role that my friends played in supporting me through that time. But yeah, I mean, it's fictional. It's all fictional. I love traveling, which Aisha loves traveling. I love, looking at figuring out the history and the culture of different places and people where we go. So yeah, there are definitely aspects of her character that I relate to, but I'm not as cool as Aisha. I wouldn't get myself in those because I'm a bit scared.
Oh, funny. I think it just goes without saying, like, particularly with first-time writers, we write what we know, and I think we just can't help parts of our personality forming parts of the characters that we have formed or created in our stories, and there's nothing wrong with that because your story is your baby, it's part of you, so of course there's going to be part of you in the characters. Thank you so much for your question, Uska. So we do have to wrap this up, unfortunately, so I've got to have some fun questions to wrap this up with our special guests Melati and Huda. The first question I'd like to ask you, now this is just rapid fire, so just think one or the other. Don't overthink it, it's all good. Now, when you eventually get out of lockdown, do you like a tropical or winter getaway?
Tropical.
Yeah, I miss tropical. I miss the beach. There's no beach near where I live. I miss it.
Beach,
now, when
poolside.
Yes, 100%. And hijabi tan lining. I do that. Yes, I do that. Okay, when you're reading, because we all love reading, do you like open endings or closed endings when you're reading a book?
Closed.
Definitely closed.
Yes,
yeah.
we need to know. Yes. Now, if you had the opportunity to adapt your books to film, would you like it to be a TV series or a movie?
One can dream. A movie.
Movie, yeah.
I think a movie as well.
Yeah, a trilogy.
A trilogy.
A trilogy for Melati.
To be in a trilogy.
I love that. So, any Netflix producers out there listening in for both authors? So, if you were to embark on a quest with any of the characters that you have written in your books, who would you like to go on a quest with and why?
I'll go with Akil because he's just my buddy in real life and in the book.
Oh,
So sweet.
Melati?
I'd go with Aisha. Should we, we'd be friends, I'd say.
Love it. And when you're not writing and reading, what are your hobbies? What do you like to do? What would we see you doing?
Hobbies. I don't know what they are.
You have children. You have no hobbies.
I used to do things. I don't know, Melati. Let me think. You go.
Hobbies. I play with my cats. I've just joined a mum's band. Shout out to all of my mum's band people out there. We're beginner guitarists and singers. Like we don't really you know, it's all just for fun. We can't actually, you know, well, we can, but we're just learning, and it's all just for fun. So it's yeah, we try to do that, but it's mainly writing, reading. And Ozga knows I've started crochet as well, like a grandma.
Yes, crochet is cool. I have a friend, shout out to Fibs Strings. She's an amazing sister who does a lot of crochet and handmade crochets for us too. She's great. That's very therapeutic, I hear, crochet. Last question for the both of you. If the two of you had an opportunity to collaborate on a story, what would you like to collaborate on? What do you think would make a great story between the two of you?
Well, it needs mystery, right?
It's mystery. It needs travel, I'd say.
Yes, it needs travel. And it needs the cheek of Huda, but Aisha's, you know, her focus, her tunnel vision, and her intellect, I think, as well.
I'd love to collaborate on a story. I think it would be awesome.
That would be fun.
That would be cool. Fun. Well, nothing's impossible, and the pressure's on now. So we're hoping to see something from the two of you. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, look, Huda and Melati, it was an absolute pleasure and honor to share the virtual stage with you both. Thank you very much for talking to us about your writing experiences, for sharing that advice with us. It was wonderful to listen to, and also about the importance of Muslim representation, particularly in the MG space. To the viewers that have joined in, thank you so much for being here, for your wonderful comments and questions. Please don't forget to go to Better Read Than Dead's bookshop. There's a website that's dedicated directly for our guests. The link was in the chat, and you can get copies of Huda and Melati's books that way. Once again, I want to thank everybody for being here. Huda and Melati, take care, stay safe. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.